She married her uncle, killed his son, and made her own boy emperor. Then rumors began that she didn't just raise him, she ruled him, slept near him, and never let go. He tried to poison her, tried to drown her, tried to run, but mothers like her don't die that easy. Her name was Agrippina, and she turned Rome into a family business, with blood and bedsheets. This isn't gossip, it's imperial history. Let's begin. She was born into power. But in Rome, that meant nothing, unless you were cruel enough to keep it. Agrippina saw her first exile before she turned 10. Her mother banished, her brothers targeted. Her bloodline, once sacred, was now a threat, and threats didn't last long in the Julio-Claudian dynasty. She learned quickly. Smiles were masks, promises meant nothing, and family was just a more dangerous kind of enemy. By 12, she had mastered how to speak without saying anything, how to walk like she belonged, even when she was the most unwanted person in the room. She wasn't just surviving, she was watching. And Rome didn't see her coming. The palace called her pretty. The Senate called her irrelevant. But behind her soft eyes was a mind trained by trauma and sharpened by revenge. Agrippina wasn't dreaming of love or safety or even justice. She was dreaming of something darker, a way back in, not as someone's daughter, not as someone's wife, but as the one no one could remove, a woman too dangerous to exile, too powerful to ignore. The kind of woman Rome feared the most. Her father was Rome's golden boy, Germanicus, general, hero, idol of the people, and then he died. Not on the battlefield, but in the east, poisoned. Agrippina was 5, old enough to remember the tears, too young to know they were fake. Rome mourned, the people cried, but behind the marble columns, wine was poured, and enemies smiled. Her father's death wasn't a tragedy, it was a warning. Her mother swore revenge. She marched the children through the streets of Rome dressed in black, begging the Senate for justice, shaming the emperor. It didn't end well. One by one, her brothers disappeared, either dead, exiled, or erased. Her mother was sent away, and Agrippina was left behind, an orphan, but not alone. She still had something more dangerous than a father, or a mother, or even a title, a memory. She remembered who killed her family, and someday, she would make Rome remember too. They called it a political alliance. Agrippina called it a sentence. At 13, she was married off to a man 3 times her age, Domitius Ahenobarbus, a senator, a drunk, and a man known more for cruelty than competence. The historians say he was violent. The servants said he laughed when animals were tortured, and Agrippina said nothing, because she couldn't. Every night she learned something new, where pain begins, where fear hides, where silence becomes armor. This wasn't a marriage. It was training, for a Rome that devoured women, and for a child she would soon give birth to, a boy who would one day be emperor, a boy she would raise, not with love, but with strategy. His name was Lucius Domitius, but the world would know him as Nero. The monster died, not in battle, not in scandal, just gone. Domitius left behind debts, enemies, and one living asset, a boy. Lucius was barely 3, pale, quiet, with eyes too old for his age. Just like hers, Agrippina didn't cry. She didn't wear black. She didn't mourn. She calculated. Rome saw her as a widow. She saw herself as unchained. With her husband gone, she was no longer tied to a brute, but more importantly, no longer tied to his politics. She had something better. A child with Julian blood, a claim to the throne, But power in Rome wasn't inherited. It was taken, and no one gave it to a woman. So Agrippina made a decision. If Rome would never hand her a crown, she would raise one instead. And that boy would belong to her. Body, mind, and throne. It wasn't enough to be noble, not in Rome. Agrippina had the wrong name. Too powerful, too connected, too close to the throne. So they removed her. The new emperor Caligula, her nephew, saw her as a threat. He exiled her without a trial. No crime, no defense, just gone. And Nero? Taken from her. Raised elsewhere. Controlled by Rome. Exile didn't break her. It clarified her. She learned to live without servants, without jewels, without safety. But she kept one thing, her mind. And inside it, a single obsession. Get back. Not to reclaim what was hers, but to take what was never offered. When Caligula fell stabbed 30 times by his own guards, Rome thought it was free, but Agrippina knew better. Power doesn't disappear. It waits. And so did she. The empire forgot her, but she remembered everything. When Claudius became emperor, Rome needed stability, respectability, a woman who looked like virtue, but knew how to play. They called Agrippina back, and she smiled. She walked back into Rome not as a widow or exile, but as a force. Her enemies whispered, her allies watched. And her son? He was growing, handsome, calculated, cold, just like her. This time she wasn't here to survive. She was here to build something, a throne, a dynasty, and no one, no man, no senator, no emperor was going to stop her. Not anymore. There were laws against it. There were gods against it. But Agrippina married her uncle anyway. Claudius, emperor of Rome. Old, weak, easily convinced. The Senate cringed. The people gossiped, but none dared stop her. She became empress, not by birth, not by love, but by calculation. She rewrote the law to legalize incest. She rewrote the court to obey her word. And in the emperor's bed, she didn't just lie beside power, she ruled it. Claudius thought he was marrying family. He was marrying his replacement. He just didn't know it yet. There was one problem left. Britannicus, the true son of Claudius, the boy born to be emperor, and Agrippina didn't like competition. She smiled at him in the corridors, called him little brother, praised his tutors, kissed his forehead in public. But in private, she was designing his funeral. Britannicus was only 10, sweet, quiet, still trusting, too trusting. Agrippina began cutting off his allies. One by one, tutors were dismissed, guards reassigned, allies silenced. She didn't need to kill the boy. Not yet. She just needed to make him invisible. Rome started forgetting he existed. And in that silence, she pushed Nero forward. Not with love, but with politics. She bribed senators, threatened generals, falsified lineage, whispered to Claudius every night. Nero wasn't the emperor's stepson. He was now the heir, because Agrippina said so. And Claudius, old and soft, believed it. Even as the wine tasted strange, even as the pain started in his stomach, even as he died, with her standing beside him, smiling, widow, mother, regent. Rome belonged to her now. Nero was 15, and he was beautiful. Golden curls, marble skin, the kind of face Rome adored and feared. Agrippina dressed him in white, staged his triumphs, choreographed his speeches. Every appearance was a coronation in disguise. But emperors don't rule alone. They marry. And Agrippina had a plan. She chose Octavia, daughter of Claudius, sister of Britannicus, a union made of blood and betrayal. It wasn't a love story. It was insurance. She married her son into the imperial bloodline, which meant he now had a stronger claim than anyone alive, including his dead stepfather, including his half-brother, including Rome itself. On the day of the wedding, Nero stood tall beside Octavia, smiling, obedient, silent. But it wasn't his voice that mattered. It was hers. Agrippina walked just behind him, not as a guest, not as a mother, but as the architect of a throne no man could claim without her, and a marriage that didn't bind Nero to a woman. It bound him to her. At 16, Nero became emperor. The Senate applauded. The people cheered, but everyone knew who held the strings. Agrippina sat behind the throne, not beside it, behind it. She didn't need a crown, she had her son. She controlled the army through favors, the treasury through fear, and Nero through silence. He wasn't allowed to speak without approval. He couldn't leave the palace without guards loyal to her. He couldn't choose his own tutors, his own meals, his own clothes. He ruled the world, but not his life, and the world noticed. Statues were erected not just of Nero, but of Agrippina. Coins bore her image. Edicts were signed in her name. For the first time in Roman history, the empire bowed to a woman. Not openly, not officially, but undeniably. Agrippina was not the emperor. She was something worse, the emperor's mother. And the mother never blinked. Rome loved a show, and Agrippina gave them one. At the temple of Jupiter, she walked behind Nero like a goddess behind her creation. Robed in imperial silk, eyes locked forward, chin high, the crowd roared for the boy emperor. But all eyes lingered on the woman. She stepped forward to embrace him, a mother's kiss. But it lasted too long, too close, too knowing. The crowd didn't cheer. They stared. That day, the whispers began. It wasn't what she did. It was how. She touched his face like it belonged to her. She adjusted his robe like it was hers to remove. She didn't just raise an emperor. She handled him. The court called it devotion. The Senate called it disturbing. But Nero? He said nothing. He smiled. He let her hold the stage. Because he wasn't ready to fight her. Not yet. Rome had no proof, just a feeling that something was wrong. The emperor avoided his wife. He avoided his friends, but never his mother. She sat beside him during trials, stood behind him at ceremonies, a shadow that smiled too much, knew too much. Nero was growing taller, stronger, restless, but she never let him out of reach. She appointed his advisors, read his letters, interrupted his thoughts. He was emperor, and still. He needed permission to breathe, Rome whispered. The guards looked away. The palace tensed. One night, a servant dropped a scroll, a private note from Agrippina. It read, "Control must be reinforced. He is slipping." The boy who ruled the world was being monitored like a child, and Rome knew. This wasn't guidance. It was possession. But no one spoke out. Not yet. Because the last man who challenged Agrippina had been found in the Tiber, face down, mouth full of coins. It started with a girl. Her name was Acte, a former slave with soft eyes and a quiet laugh. Nero fell in love, or whatever version of love a boy like him could feel. She wasn't noble, she wasn't powerful, she wasn't chosen by his mother, and that made her dangerous. Agrippina hated her on sight, called her vulgar, threatened her attendance, spread rumors about her bloodline. Nero didn't argue. He hid. He met Acte in secret gardens, behind locked doors, under false names. For the first time, he felt like himself. And Agrippina felt it. He was slipping. So she doubled her presence. joined his meetings, intercepted his gifts, confronted him in front of his guards. She didn't shout, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. If you dishonor the line of Augustus for a slave girl, Rome will punish us both. But it wasn't a warning. It was a threat. One she meant, and one he would never forget. Acte wasn't the first, but she was the turning point. After her, Nero changed. He stopped asking. He started hiding, and Agrippina noticed. When she walked into a room, he stood slower. When she offered advice, he nodded less. When she kissed his cheek in public, he flinched. She had raised him to obey. Now he was rehearsing defiance. So she retaliated the only way she knew how: control. Act disappeared for a week. Her servants were flogged. Her letters were intercepted and burned. Nero said nothing. But he learned. Anyone he loved would be punished. So he loved less. And Agrippina mistook it for victory. Until she found out about Claudia. Another girl. Another secret. Another reminder that Nero was slipping away. So she summoned the girl. In the middle of the night. With candles. With guards. With quiet. The girl never returned. And Nero never asked where she went. But that night, he stopped looking at his mother and started planning. He tried to ignore her. He spent more time in the gardens, took longer walks, invented reasons to travel. But she followed, not physically, politically. Her spies sat in his council. Her scribes read his letters. Her portraits hung beside his. She called it support. He called it surveillance. When he spoke in the Senate, she sat behind the curtain. When he kissed his wife, she commented on her posture. When he smiled, she asked why. He stopped smiling. The palace began to notice. The praetorians turned their heads. The servants walked quieter. No one dared name it, but everyone felt it. The boy emperor was afraid of his mother, not because she was cruel, but because she had built his world, and now she was watching him dismantle it. Every move he made, he heard her breath behind it. Every mistake, he saw her smile. She didn't need to punish him anymore. She had already made him a cage, and called it love. It happened during a banquet. A joke was made, a small one, something about Nero's beard. The room laughed. Agrippina didn't. She stood, brushed her robe, and said loudly, "A ruler who cannot govern his face cannot govern Rome." The laughter died. Nero froze. That night he drank more than usual. Sat in silence. Watched his mother talk with senators like she was still empress. He clenched his cup so hard it cracked. The next morning, he summoned his guards. He didn't say kill. He said separate. Take her advisors, strip her guard, cancel her ceremonies, move her chambers far from the palace core. She wasn't exiled, just erased. But Agrippina wasn't surprised. She had raised him well, too well. He was finally doing what she had trained him to do: survive. And now he was learning what it meant to survive her. The first attempt was subtle, a poisoned dish delivered during dinner. She tasted it, paused, smiled, and kept eating. The second attempt was a gift, a ship lavish, royal, rigged to collapse. They invited her to sail at sunset. It broke in two over calm water. She swam to shore, alone, alive. And Rome held its breath, because Agrippina was supposed to die, quietly, accidentally, elegantly, but she didn't. She returned soaking wet and furious. Nero denied everything, called it sabotage, swore on the gods. She said nothing, just stared. That night, she locked her doors. The next morning, she wrote her will. She knew what was coming. It wasn't fear she felt. It was recognition. The boy she had built was finally finishing his lesson. And this time, he would not fail. They came at night. No trial, no decree, just footsteps and steel. 3 men entered her villa. She didn't scream, she didn't run. She sat, draped in black, lit by a single oil lamp, calm. When they raised their blades, she opened her robe, pointed to her stomach, and said, "Strike here." This gave him life. They hesitated, then obeyed. Not because they wanted to, because she ordered it. Her body was found before dawn, but her shadow never left the palace. For weeks, Nero couldn't eat. He said he heard her voice in the halls. He ordered statues removed. Her name scraped from stone. But it didn't matter. You don't erase Agrippina by deleting her. You only prove she still rules you. Even from the grave. After her death, Nero celebrated. Games, parades, statues of himself. He told Rome she had plotted against him, that her death was justice. But no one believed it, because everyone remembered the way she walked, the way she spoke, the way she commanded the world without ever raising her voice. They remembered how she made emperors and destroyed them. They remembered how she kissed her son in public, how long it lasted. They remembered everything. And so did history. Nero would go on to burn cities, kill wives, kill friends, kill himself. But nothing ever haunted him like her. Not because she was cruel, but because she had loved him with the kind of love that leaves a mark. Deep, permanent, and imperial, Rome buried her. But it never moved on. Every empress after Agrippina was compared to her. Every mother of an emperor was watched more closely. She had changed something, not by ruling, but by proving that a woman could. Not with charm, not with beauty, not even with seduction, but with fear. Her portraits were destroyed, her name blackened, but her method copied by queens, by mistresses, by mothers from palaces to parliaments. They learned from her. That influence isn't taken, it's woven. And once it's inside the crown, you can't pull it out. Agrippina didn't just raise an emperor. She raised a blueprint for how power survives when the world says no.